There are doors in life that do not open because of luck. They open because someone has walked far enough in silence. Libra, if you are standing in front of a feeling that feels strange, both nervous and calm, both unfamiliar and deeply familiar, that is not an accident. That is the moment when life looks back at you and quietly says, "You have endured enough." You may have wondered why some seasons last so long, why everything feels suspended in midair, not bad enough to collapse, but never good enough to smile with ease. You kept moving. You kept your balance. You played your role, even when, inside, you were so tired. You no longer wanted to explain yourself to anyone, and you did not explain. You chose silence. You chose patience. You chose to keep going, not because you were weak, but because you were deep enough to understand that some things cannot be rushed. Some lessons are not learned through noise, but through very long, very quiet nights when you finally face yourself. The nights where you ask who you are, when you no longer need to please anyone. The nights where you realize your value is not measured by how much you can carry, but by whether your heart remains intact. After everything, the moments you hesitated, the moments you paused, the moments you chose not to react, those were not failures. They were the quiet refinement of a soul learning how to grow. Libra does not move as fast as others, but you move far. You travel through emotional landscapes most people are afraid to enter. You understand that balance does not come from avoiding difficulty, but from staying long enough to truly understand it. And then, one day, very gently, you feel the air around you change. No noise, no fireworks, just an ordinary morning with a little less weight in your chest. You no longer feel the need to fix everything. You no longer feel the need to prove yourself right. You begin to see that some things do not need saving because they were never meant to be yours. And in the moment you loosen your grip, space begins to open. The opportunity you are about to touch is not a reward. It is recognition. It arrives because you are ready, because you understand boundaries, because you respect yourself, because you can say no without guilt. You have learned that kindness does not require self-sacrifice. And when you stand firmly in that truth, life begins to offer you different choices. You may not yet have a name for this opportunity. It may not have a clear shape, but you will feel it, like a polite invitation arriving at exactly the right moment. A door that opens without urgency, without pressure, simply standing there, wide enough for you to walk through, if you choose. And most importantly, you no longer have to chase it. It meets you at eye level, at heart level. In this new light, you begin to look back at your journey with gentleness. You no longer blame yourself for being slow. You understand that this path is what gave you depth. It taught you the difference between what drains you and what helps you grow. It showed you that not every closed door is a loss. Sometimes it is preparation for a path that fits you better. And as you pause for a moment, breathe, and feel your heartbeat right now, you realize something essential. You are no longer where you used to be. You have shifted into a different state of being, a place where you choose yourself more, trust yourself more, and allow yourself to receive what once felt too far away, not through urgency, but through a calm, steady readiness. And it is in that calm state that you begin to remember what you have been through, not with resentment, but with a softer gaze, a slower one, as if for the first time. You are allowing yourself to look back without armor. There were years, Libra, when you lived as the anchor. No one asked you to carry everything, yet you did. No one demanded that you understand everyone's emotions, Yet you listened. You became used to standing in the middle, holding things together, keeping the tension from breaking the room, keeping relationships from drifting off course. You became so good at it that sometimes you forgot when you first became tired. You once believed that if you slowed down, everything would fall apart. That if you were not present, not adjusting, not yielding, no one else would step in. And so you kept moving, kept holding, kept balancing, even as small, invisible fractures began to form inside you. They did not bleed, but they lingered quietly over time, leaving you feeling empty. Even while surrounded by people, there were evenings when you sat still, not sad, not happy, just exhausted. Exhausted from thinking too much. Exhausted from constantly asking whether you had done the right thing. Exhausted from not knowing when it would finally be your turn to lean on someone else. But you did not say it out loud. You became used to handling your emotions in silence. You became used to reassuring yourself that everything would be okay as long as you tried just a little harder. And in those moments, when it felt like no one was watching, you were learning more than you realized. You learned how to read what was never spoken. You learned how to sense the atmosphere of a room with a single breath. You learned the difference between what was truly your responsibility and what you had been unconsciously carrying. For others, these lessons did not come from books. They came from lived experience, from the times you chose patience over resistance. You may have compared yourself to others, watched them move faster, more decisively, more clearly, watched them reach things you also longed for while you were still sitting with questions that had no answers yet. What you could not see then was that you were building a very different foundation. Not loud, not visible, but solid. A foundation shaped by self-understanding, by the ability to remain balanced, even while storms raged inside. Those difficult days did not take anything from you. They refined you. They taught you where your limits were, and more importantly, they taught you that you had the right to set those limits without asking permission. You began to understand that moving slowly does not mean falling behind. Sometimes it is the only way to avoid losing yourself along the way. And then, very naturally, you stopped trying to hold everything together the way you once did. Not because you gave up, but because you realized that not everything needs you in order to survive. You remained someone who cares, someone who understands, but you no longer traded your peace for other people's comfort. You began to choose more carefully, choosing what truly deserved your energy, choosing what genuinely nourished you instead of what simply drained you further. From that long, quiet journey of endurance, a very subtle strength was formed. Not the strength of control, but the strength of steadiness. You stand there now, without needing to prove yourself, without needing to compete, yet present enough for life to recognize that you are ready for something different, something that no longer asks you to brace yourself, but allows you to move forward with a balance forged by time itself. And when that quiet strength has fully settled inside you, something very subtle begins to happen. Not a big decision, not a clear declaration, just a shift. As gentle as a breath, you realize you no longer want to fix everything. You no longer want to piece together what is cracked, simply because you are afraid of empty space. You look at an old relationship, a familiar job, a belief that once mattered deeply, and for the first time, you do not feel the need to hold on, not because it was wrong, but because it has already fulfilled its role in your life. Letting go does not feel like loss here. It feels like setting down a suitcase you have been carrying for far too long. You are not throwing it away. You are not angry at it. You simply understand that you no longer need to carry it. In that moment, your shoulders soften, your back straightens, your breath deepens. You no longer tense yourself to keep everything in place. You allow things to stand where they truly belong, even when that place is behind you. Libra has always been skilled at questioning themselves. Have I done enough? Have I been good enough? Have I been patient enough? But now, those questions begin to quiet, and a different question emerges, softer, yet far more important. Does this still fit who I am? Does this still nourish me? And when the answer is no, you no longer argue with yourself. You accept it. You step out of familiar loops, even as your legs still tremble slightly. There were relationships you once believed would last forever. Plans you trusted with your whole heart. But time has changed you, and what does not grow with you begins to feel constricting. You do not need to turn that into tragedy. You only need the honesty to admit that you are different now. And when you find the courage to be truthful about that change, a new space opens. Quiet, bright, real. At first, that space may feel unfamiliar because it is empty, because the familiar noise is gone, because there is nothing left to constantly fix. But in that emptiness, you begin to hear yourself more clearly. Not the voice of obligation, not the voice of fear, but the voice of genuine desire, the voice that says, you deserve peace, that you do not need to exhaust yourself in order to be loved, that life does not require the sacrifice of your soul just to allow you to stay. Purification is not about perfection, it is about truth. You keep the relationships where you can breathe, the work that allows you to grow without draining you, the beliefs that help you stand steady, not pull you down. And when you do that, very naturally, what no longer fits begins to leave. No noise, no resentment. Each thing simply finds its rightful place. Libra begins to walk more lightly. You no longer look back as often. You understand that the past has given you enough lessons, and you do not need to live inside it to prove that you have learned them. You carry wisdom, not weight. You carry softness, not fear. And strangely enough, when you stop holding so tightly, life begins to bring new things toward you, naturally, and at exactly the right time. You do not yet need to know exactly where you are going. You only need to know that the road ahead no longer asks you to be anyone other than yourself. There is a very gentle feeling guiding you, like morning light, filtering through leaves, not blinding, just enough to see the next step. And in that light, you understand that this letting go is not an ending. It is a quiet preparation for the doors that will open as you walk forward with empty hands and a full heart. And then, when your hands have finally become light enough to no longer cling, something very special begins to reveal itself. Not like a miracle crashing in, but like a subtle signal, clear enough to recognize if you are truly listening. It may appear in an ordinary conversation, a casual offer, a thought that rises quietly. At the very moment, you stop searching for answers. No noise, no spectacle. Yet it carries a strangely familiar feeling, as if you have been waiting for it for a very long time. Libra may notice that this opportunity does not carry the energy of risk. It does not push you to leap blindly. Instead, it stands there, calm, steady, like a door opened at exactly the right height. You do not need to reach up. You do not need to bow down. You only need to step forward. And what makes you pause for a moment is not fear, But surprise. Surprise. Because this time, you do not feel like you are giving anything up. In the past, every opportunity may have come with a price. The price of exhaustion, the price of pleasing others, the price of forcing yourself into a version someone else expected. But this opportunity feels different. It does not ask you to change your nature. It only asks you to bring yourself whole, honest, unhidden. And it is precisely this simplicity that makes it so valuable. You may find yourself guided by someone new, not to lead you, but to illuminate the path. Someone who does not pull you forward, but walks beside you. Or you may realize that the guide you have been looking for is you after everything you have lived through. The clarity you once searched for outside has now formed within. You know what you want. And more importantly, you know what you no longer want. This opportunity feels like a passport, stamped not with promises, but with lived experience. Each time you chose to respect your boundaries, each time you dared to say no to what drained you, each time you stayed with your truth, even when it was uncomfortable, each of those moments added another stamp. And now, that passport is full enough to carry you into a different space in your life. That space is not as glamorous as you once imagined. It is quieter, more spacious. There, you do not have to explain yourself constantly. You do not have to prove that you deserve to be heard. You feel respect in the way others look at you, not because of how much you do, but because of how you show up. You begin to understand that maturity is not about bracing yourself, but about being fully yourself, without shame. Libra steps into this new environment with a different kind of calm. You are not carrying the fear of being left behind. You no longer feel the need to race. You have arrived at your own right timing, and that quiet certainty causes the world around you to respond. Opportunities follow opportunities, not because you are chasing them, but because you are ready to receive them. A new belief is forming, very gentle, yet deeply rooted. The belief that you do not need to sacrifice peace to achieve success, that you can rise to a higher place in life while keeping your kindness, your softness. That worthiness is not something you must ask for, but something you allow yourself to receive. And as you stand in this moment, feeling the ground beneath your feet more solid, the air around you clearer, you understand something essential. This passport does not only take you somewhere new, it brings you back to yourself, a version shaped by time, deep enough to understand, bright enough to trust, and open enough to welcome what is quietly making its way toward you. And once you are standing steadily inside this new space, something else begins to move, quietly, slowly, but undeniably real. You may not be able to name it right away. You simply notice that the familiar pressure is no longer pressing so heavily on your chest. The worries about money, about instability, about constantly having to manage everything just to keep it from falling apart, no longer consume your mind the way they once did. Not because everything is perfect, but because you have stepped out of survival mode, a state you stayed in for far too long. There were seasons, Libra, when you believed money was something you had to trade for. You traded time. You traded peace. Sometimes, you even traded trust in yourself. You convinced yourself that exhaustion was normal, that stress was the price of entry, that unless you pushed yourself to the edge, there would be no place for you. But now, as your life slows just enough for you to listen, you begin to recognize a very different truth. Abundance does not come from pushing harder. It comes from standing in the right place. Your income may begin to shift in very subtle ways. A new opportunity appears right when you are no longer afraid to try. A financial decision that once felt uncertain suddenly becomes clear. Or perhaps it is simpler than that. You begin to manage what you already have with awareness, no longer spending or working just to fill an emotional gap. Each small choice opens another door, creating a flow that is gentle yet continuous. What is different now is the way money arrives. It does not feel heavy. It does not ask you to lose yourself. It does not push you into environments that make you shrink. Instead, you feel more respected, more fairly compensated. You are seen, not only for what you produce, but for the value you bring. Stability begins to form, not as a sudden leap, but like ground, being carefully layered, one solid foundation at a time. Libra begins to understand that balance is not about giving everything equal attention, but about placing energy where energy is returned. You no longer try to do everything at once. You choose. You focus, and that focus opens doors you could not see before because you were too busy holding everything together. Now, no longer bracing yourself, you finally have space to build. A profound shift occurs in the way you see money. It is no longer a measure of your worth, no longer a constant source of anxiety. It becomes a reflection of your relationship with yourself. When you respect your time, money begins to respect you. When you stop accepting what drains you, better opportunities find their way to you. And when you allow yourself to believe that you are worthy, abundance finally has somewhere to stay. You begin to feel relief in the most ordinary moments, a morning without rushing, a decision that does not keep you awake all night, a quiet sense of safety. When you think about the future, these moments, though subtle, are signs that abundance is taking root. Not the kind that impresses others, but the kind that allows you to breathe deeply and smile alone. And as this flow continues, you realize you are no longer being pulled back by old pressures. The fears that once led you to accept less than your true value begin to fade. In their place, a clear feeling emerges. You are walking in rhythm with yourself, a path where success is not a distant destination, but the feeling of living correctly, working with integrity, and receiving in return what is truly deserved within the peace you have learned to protect. And as that flow becomes familiar, you begin to realize something deeply important, something you may never have dared to believe before. You no longer have to live in a constant state of alert. You no longer feel the need to always prepare for the worst. You no longer have to tense your body just to survive another day. A profound quiet is settling inside you, as if your body and your mind are finally being allowed to rest. After a very long season of self-protection, Libra once became used to telling yourself that you needed to be stronger, try harder, endure just a little more, and then everything would be okay. But now, you begin to understand that not every storm requires you to stand in the center and hold it together. There are storms you are allowed to step away from, close the door on, and choose safety for yourself. This shift is not loud, but it is decisive. It comes from a quiet choice to no longer accept a life that slowly wears you down. The worries that once lingered, that clung to you like an old habit, no longer hold the center of your attention. They may still pass through, but they no longer stay. You no longer believe the whisper that says, you are not good enough, not fast enough, not worthy enough. You begin to see those thoughts as traces of a past chapter, not as the truth of who you are now. You may notice this shift in very ordinary moments, when you no longer feel guilty for resting, when you stop over-explaining your choices, when you say no without needing to justify it. These small moments are the clearest proof that you have left survival mode. You are no longer living to endure. You are beginning to live, to feel. Libra is learning how to place yourself where you belong, not by demanding, but through self-respect. You choose environments that do not make you shrink. You choose relationships that do not require you to sacrifice your peace. You choose work and directions where you can grow without trading away your mental and emotional health. And strangely enough, when you do this, the world around you begins to adjust. You may notice that you no longer react as intensely as before. Things that once hurt deeply now pass through, leaving a brief pause, and then dissolving. Not because you have become numb, but because you have learned not to let everything enter too deeply. You remain soft, but no longer fragile. This is a rare, beautiful form of maturity. There is a very real sense of relief when you realize you no longer need to prove your worth. You do not need to please everyone. You do not need to stay where you no longer belong, just because you fear being left behind. You understand that what is meant for you will never require you to make yourself smaller. And what does require that, no matter how familiar it feels, no longer has a place in your life. The greatest turning point is not in your external circumstances, but in how you treat yourself. You pause before agreeing. You listen to your body before forcing it forward. You allow yourself to change your mind without shame. These quiet actions are reshaping your entire journey. And when you look back, you will see that the difficult things did not disappear overnight, but they no longer hold the same power. They no longer define you. You have stepped out of their shadow, standing taller, more grounded, with a clear knowing that you deserve better. Not because you are perfect, but because you are honest enough to choose yourself. And in that choice, a new path is slowly revealing itself, quiet, yet full of promise, waiting for you to step forward with the very peace you have just reclaimed. And within that newly found sense of peace, a very different awareness begins to take shape. There is no longer the urge to move fast, no longer the hunger to be seen right away. Instead, there is a quiet steadiness, like placing your feet on solid ground, and knowing you can stand there for a long time. Libra begins to understand that success does not have to arrive with applause. Sometimes, it arrives as the calm of waking up each morning, knowing you are moving in the right direction. You are no longer pulled by the rhythm of other people's lives. You stop measuring yourself against the polished stories outside. You begin to see clearly the value of your time, your energy, and what you choose to devote yourself to. Each decision becomes a little slower, but far deeper. You no longer ask, "Will this impress others?" You ask instead, "Will this allow me to respect myself?" And that single question changes the way you move forward. There are opportunities now that you choose not to take, even though once you would have been afraid to miss them. Not because you lack ambition, but because you are clear enough to see that not every opportunity is worth the balance you have worked to build. You choose paths you can walk for a long time, not just paths that move fast. You choose projects, relationships, environments where you can be yourself without constantly reshaping who you are to fit someone else's mold. success begins to take on a different form. It is no longer a distant destination, but the feeling that every step you take has meaning. You notice yourself working with fuller presence, not out of fear of failure, but because you understand what you are building. You no longer spend your energy trying to prove that you are good enough. You allow the results to speak through patience, through consistency, the kind that only comes from having walked through enough challenges. Libra realizes that real value is not found in how many places you show up, but in how deeply you are present. Where you choose to be, you begin to invest in what sustains you over time, in skills, in understanding, in inner stability, and little by little, life responds in very tangible ways. Trust from others, opportunities that arrive on time, a steady flow that no longer leaves you scrambling to patch together the future. A new confidence settles in, quiet, mature, fully formed. You do not need to speak loudly about yourself. You do not need to explain why you chose this path instead of another. You know that what is meant for you will recognize you, even when you remain silent. And that knowing gives you a profound sense of freedom. The freedom to do your work well, the freedom to leave when it is time, the freedom to stay when it feels right. You also begin to understand that sustainable success does not come from controlling everything, but from knowing when to let go. You are no longer afraid of quiet spaces. You know that not every moment requires forward motion. Sometimes, standing still is what allows the foundation to fully set. It is this patience that keeps what you build from collapsing. It gives things time to take root, to grow naturally without being forced. In this new rhythm of life, you find yourself more generous with your own humanity. You allow yourself to learn without punishing yourself for not being perfect. You allow yourself to mature without losing your softness. You understand now that success is not becoming someone else, but becoming the clearest version of who you already are. The version that knows what it needs. The version that knows what it deserves. The version that no longer doubts that truth. And as you walk with this certainty, everything begins to arrange itself in a way that feels personal and right. No force, no urgency, just each step placed with a deep trust that this path is wide enough for you to continue, strong enough for you to build, and calm enough for you to remain. And in that quiet alignment, success is already present. It does not need a name, but it is clear enough for you to feel that you are living a life with depth, with value, and with meaning that lasts.